Hi girls, today we're looking at summary statistics. So you can see my screen set up a little bit differently today so that we can also have a look at how we can calculate some of these statistics using our calculators. So our learning intention today is to analyze data using measures of location and measures of spread. So these are special names for some of the calculations that we make. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify what are the measures of location and calculate them for appropriate sets of data. We want to also be able to identify measures of spread and calculate those. And the last thing is we're also going to be exploring the statistics mode on the calculator to find mean, median, and interquartile range. There's a variety of other calculations that we can also do on a calculator, but we'll hold on to those for a slightly later time. So just to start off with, when we're looking at measures of location, so location is telling us where the information is, or in other words, we're looking for averages. So the mean is your typical one, so that's what we call the average, okay? It's usually represented by the letter mu, okay? So that's a Greek letter, okay? So it looks like a U with a really long tail on it. Or often we'll use X with a line on top. We call that X bar, okay? So those are the most typical symbols you'll see. You'll see this one a lot more in Year 11 and Year 12. For the time being, we usually work more with X bar. So to calculate the mean, you add up all of the scores and you divide by the number of scores there are. When we're looking for the median, we're looking for the middle of the scores. Okay, so we're looking at starting from the end and we're crossing off all of the scores until we get to the middle, and then that middle value will be the median. If the median is halfway between two values, we average the middle two numbers out in order to find that median. Now the symbol we use for median is Q2, okay? It means quartile 2, which we used a fair bit when we were looking at box plots last year, okay? Or in other words, it's the second line that cuts the data into quarters. The mode is the score that occurs the most, okay? So it's just looking at which one do you see the most of, that is the mode. So that can also be a form of an average. So a mode is most typically used when we're looking at categorical data where we can't quantify each of those items. So if we were looking at the average shirt size in small, medium, and large, you can see the mode makes sense. Okay, the shirt size that occurs the most will be the average shirt size of certain people. What we've also got are measures of spread. So spread, we can look at range. So range is just your highest value minus your lowest value. We have interquartile range, where we take Q3 and Q1. So remember, Q2 was the middle of this data, and it was when we split data into quarters. Interquartile range is taking the lower quartile, or the bottom quartile, and the upper quartile and finding the range of those two. Okay, so if I had my data like this, there's Q2, that's going to be Q1, and then that's going to be Q3. So we're sort of looking at where the 50% of the data is going to lie. Okay, so that's what it means to find the interquartile range. And the last one that we use for measures of spread is standard deviation. Now this one we're going to do in a lot more detail a little bit later, so we're just going to hold on to that thought for now, but that's another measure of how spread out some scores are. So here's just a really quick definition of each of these. So measures of location, or we also call them measures of central tendency, so where the middle is, give the average or the middle value of a data set. So mean, median, and mode can only mode can be used for categorical data. Okay, so we can use mode for numerical data as well, but if we're only looking at categorical data, we can only use the mode to find where the average is. We also talk about measures of spread, or we also call them measures of dispersion. So disperse means it spreads out, okay, so it's just another name. So it's how spread out the scores are. The easiest ones to calculate are your range and interquartile range. Standard deviation is a bit trickier. We will look at that in a later exercise. Now, another thing that we look at when we're looking at data and analysing it is position of outliers. So an outlier is a data point that's far removed from all of the rest of the data points. So often when you get an outlier, it's a sign that maybe there might have been some calculation errors, or there could have been something wrong with that particular data point. Now, it's not always an issue. So, say for example, if we were in a classroom and we plotted the ages of everyone in the classroom, obviously my age is going to be an outlier compared to all of your ages, because you're all about 15, 16, and I'm not. So my age will be an outlier, but it's not an issue there because that's to be expected in a classroom. So not all outliers are bad, but often if you do get an outlier, your question is, does that point actually fit in the information given? Okay, could there have been a mistake when calculating that number, or maybe someone's written out a number incorrectly or something like that. Okay. Now, if we do have an outlier, there's a lot of ways of defining it. Sometimes we just do it by eye. So when we're looking at a dot plot, if there's a really big gap between a number, we would often call it an outlier. But there is an actual calculative way of working out whether it's an outlier or not. This one's one that you use a lot. You'll use in Year 11 and Year 12, and it is that an outlier is a score which is less than Q1 minus 1.5 lots of the interquartile range, or it's bigger than Q3 plus 1.5 times the interquartile range. So basically, you're going to work out your quartiles, and then you're going to work out quartile, and then you look at how much below the quartile you can go, and then how much above the quartile you can go. And if there's any numbers further out than that, then those would be considered outliers. Now, when we look at outliers, it greatly affects the mean and the range of data. It has a bit of an effect on median and interquartile range, so it might be only like a slight minor differences. An outlier doesn't affect the mode at all. Okay, so if you've got one score that's out in the middle of nowhere, okay, the mode is still going to be the same value. When it comes to standard deviation, which we will look at later, outliers affect those a lot as well. All right, so we're going to have a look at a couple of questions. We're just going to do some of these calculations by hand first, okay, and then I will also show you how this works on a calculator. So for the following sets of data, calculate the mean, median, mode, range, and interquartile range. So these are the summary statistics that we've been looking at today. So the mean, we'll use X with the line on top to symbolize that. So basically what we need to do is we need to take all of these numbers, add them all together, and then divide by the number of values. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's going to be 14 numbers altogether. This is going to be a crazy calculation. 45 plus 25 plus 25 plus 29 plus 35 plus 27, 32, 34, 33, 24, 22, 29, 27, 27. Got there. All right, there's our calculation. So we're going to put this in. I'd prefer to use my own calculator, but I'll do it on here just so you can see what's happening. So 45 plus 25 plus 25 plus 29 plus 35, 27, 32, 34, 33, 24, 22, 29, 27, and 27. And that's all over 14. So that's going to come out to be 51. No, that doesn't look right. Oh dear. Something's gone wrong. What did I do wrong? 25, 29, 35, 27, 32, 34, 33. Oh, there we go. 33. Let's check the rest of it. 24, 22, 29, 27, 27. Oh, my worst nightmare. There we go. That looks a bit better. So you could see very clearly that if I got 51, that's not an average of those numbers. So that's why I knew straight away that there's something not right. So I've got 29.5. So I hope that's the correct answer, but we will check that a little bit later. So 29.57. So that's the mean that we've calculated. Now, to work out the median, what we need to do is take all of these numbers and put them in order. So let's get at it. So 22. Then we've got a 25, 25. We've got 3 27s. Oh, we've got a 24. Let's put that in first. 24, 25, 25, 27, 27, 27. That's these ones. Then we're up to 29. We've got 32, 33, 34, 35, and 49. Oh, I missed a 29. Let me just squeeze that back in there too. So you can see it's not very fun. All right, so to find the median, what we're going to do is cross them off. Now, rather than crossing off the actual numbers, just in case I make a mistake, I'm just going to do it underneath. So those will cross off the 24 with the 35, 25 and the 34. And if we keep going, it's going to be exactly halfway between 27 and 29. So halfway between 27 and 29, so we're going to call it quartile 2, is 27 plus 29 over 2. Halfway between there is 28. So the median is 28. To find the mode, what we need to do is we need to find which score we saw the most of. So now that we've written them in order, it does make it a lot easier for us. And we could see that we had 3 lots of the 27, so the mode is going to be 27. When we go to calculate, so that's our measures of location. Now we want our measures of spread. So we're looking at range and interquartile range. So the range is going to be the highest minus lowest. Range. So that's going to be 49 minus 22. So 49 minus 22 is 27. To work out the interquartile range, remember we were talking about those quartiles, Q3 and Q1, right there, Q3 and Q1. So what we need to do is, in this data, we need to work out our quartiles. So what we've got here in the middle is Q2. So what we now need to do is take the bottom half and find the middle of the bottom half, and we do the same with the top half. So I'm going to cross them off one at a time. And we can see that this value here is in the middle. So that's going to be Q1. I'm going to do the same at the top. And so we've got Q3 is 33. So that means our interquartile range, or IQR, is 33 minus 25. Well, that's going to be 8. So those are the values that we have for mean, median, mode, range, and interquartile range for this set of data. What we're also going to look at is if I give you the data in a frequency table. So in order to work this out, what we've got here is we've got 2 scores of 10, 5 scores of 11, 9 scores of 12, and so on. So if I need to work out the mean, I need to add up all of those scores. Okay, so I've got 2 lots of the 10, and so on. So what we can do here is we can add a column called fx. Okay, so score is usually given as x and frequency is f. So what we're going to do is multiply the score by the frequency. So because I've got 2 scores of 10, that means if I add all of that together, 2 times 10 is 20. Then if I've got 5 scores of 11, then that will add up to 55. Then we'll have 108, 104. We've got 42, and we've got 15. So that's how much we get when we add up each of those different groupings of scores. So if I wanted to add up all of the scores, all I need to do is now add up those columns. I'm going to use my own calculator instead of the computer calculator because it takes so long to type in. Okay, so 55, 108, 104, 42, and 15, and we get 344. What we're also going to do is add up our frequency because that tells us how many scores we've got. So 2 plus 5 plus 9, 8, 3, and 1 gives us 28. So sometimes you'll see the symbol, this weird E sign with F. That little E sign is a capital sigma. So sigma, the Greek letter, means sum in mathematics. Okay, so it means we've added stuff together. So next to the 344, we could have called that sigma fx is 344, and that's that. So when we go to calculate the mean, it's the sum of the products over the sum of our frequency. So that's 344 over 28. Well, that will give us 12.29 or thereabouts. And we can see that's probably going to be a good number. It's probably going to make sense. All right, now to work out the median, we know the median is the middle. Now, if we've got 28 scores altogether, now we don't really want to write out all of these numbers and then do our crossing off. So what we can do is we can take 28. If we divide it in half, then we know that we've got 14 on one side and 14 on the other side. So if I've got a total of 28 numbers, then if I cut it in half, I'm going to have 14 on this side and 14 on that side. So that means the median is going to be halfway between the 14th score and the 15th score. So what we want to do is work out a running total. Where is the 14th and the 15th score? Now sometimes we might add another column, so fx is f times x. We might add a column called cumulative frequency. Okay, so cumulative frequency. So with cumulative frequency, what we're doing is we're adding them up as we go. So initially I've got 2 terms. Then when I add the 5 11s to it, I've got a total of 7 now. If I add the 9 12s, then I've got 16. If I add the 8s, that's 24. 27, then 28. So if I'm looking at score number 14 and number 15, that's going to be inside of here. Okay, so because we had 11s up till the 7th number, and then we had 12s up to the 16th one. So the 14th and the 15th are both going to be 12. So that means our Q2 is equal to 12. If we need to find the mode, we're just looking at the frequency, which number occurs the most, and you can see the frequency of 9 is the highest. So then our mode is also 12. The last thing that we're not at the last thing yet, the range. So the range is your highest score minus your lowest score. So we're looking at these scores here. So highest value is 15, lowest value is 10. So the range is 15 minus 10, which is 5. To work out interquartile range, we need our quartiles. So remember, at the moment we've got 14 numbers below and 14 numbers above. What we need to do now is cut that in half again as well. So what's going to happen is if I cut this in half, then I'm going to have 7 below and 7 above. So I need to look at what the 7th and the 8th score is. And then at the top, I'm going to be looking at the 21st, and the 22nd score. So if we look at our cumulative frequency, we can see the 7th score is 11, then the 8th score is going to be 12. So that means when we go to work out the lower quartile, Q1, it's going to be halfway between 11 and 12. So Q1 is going to be 11.5. If we're looking at the 21st and the 22nd score, we can see there's number 24. So that means the 21st and the 22nd are both going to be 13. So Q3 is going to be 13. So then the interquartile range is going to be 13 minus 11.5, which is 1.5. So those are our values. Now that's how you can do these calculations by hand. We've also got an outlier question. So the heights in centimeters of 10 basketball players are shown. Is the height of any player considered an outlier, justified with calculations? So when you're looking at these questions, you always need to do some sort of calculation, and that's this calculation that we were talking about up here. Okay, so an outlier is a score if it's less than Q1 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range, or bigger than Q3 plus 1.5 of the interquartile range. So luckily, I've actually given you these numbers in order already. So it means that when we do our median calculation and quartiles, it's a much easier job. So we can see 192 is going to be Q2. Now, if the number is taken, so if the score is taken as your median, then you ignore it when you're doing your quartiles. So we're going to ignore the Q2 and we're going to cross them off this way. So then Q1 is going to be halfway between 180 and 185, and Q3 is going to be halfway between 194 and 196. So Q1 is going to be 180 plus 185 over 2. Well, that's 182.5. Q2 is 192, and Q3 is 196. We need these to calculate the interquartile range. So interquartile range is 196 minus 182.5. And that's going to give you 13.5. Now to work out the outliers, so the lower boundary is Q1 minus 1.5 times interquartile range. So Q1 was 182.5 minus 1.5 lots of 13.5. So when you go to calculate that, minus 1.5, 13.5, that's 162.25. Your upper boundary is Q3 plus 1.5 lots of the interquartile range. So we've got 196 plus 1.5 times 13.5. So 196 plus 1.5, 13.5, that's 216.25. So in other words, what we need is to look at each of those heights. Is there anyone who's smaller than 162.25 or taller than 116? And you can see with each of those numbers, none of them are. So you can see 196 and 202, it looks like there's a pretty big gap there, or even 180 and 170. But if we take into account the whole scheme of things, even though there is a big gap there, it's not considered an outlier yet because the scores are pretty evenly spread out across those. So that's how we work with outliers. All right, let's get on to the calculator work. So this might take a bit of practice for you, but it is really important that you know how to use the statistics mode. So I know we didn't really do much of this last year, but you may have seen a bit of this in year 8, I'm hoping that you have, so it's not unfamiliar. So in this section, I've just given you some space to write down your own instructions. Okay, so whether you're using the black calculator like the one that I can see here, or if you're using the silver calculator, which is the 100 AU, the actual buttons you press are a little bit different, but you're looking for the same functions when you're looking at your calculator. Now, the calculator I've got here is actually the silver calculator. So even though it's black, it's actually the functionalities for the silver calculator. So if you've got a silver calculator, it should look exactly the same, the buttons I press. If you've still got a black calculator, then the buttons could be a little bit different. So you're just looking for the appropriate information there. So we're going to go through a couple of things. First thing, we're going to look at inputting data, so how we put the data into the calculator. We're going to also look at working with a frequency table, so kind of like our first two examples there. Then what we're going to do is calculate the mean and also find median and quartiles using our calculator. So all of those calculations we did up here, we didn't actually need to do that all by hand. We could have actually just plugged it all into a calculator. So I'm going to use these numbers, these two examples, in the calculator. So you just need to make sure you're watching and just give this a go. If you need to watch it a couple of times, watch it a couple of times. It's really important that you do. All right, so we're going to start from scratch. So the first thing that we need to do is put our calculator into statistics mode. And how we do that is we press mode. Now you're looking at here the menu here and you're looking for stat. So stat is 3. On the black calculator it's 2. Okay, so keep that in mind. So, and then we're going to 1 var. Okay, so that means one variable. Okay, we're only putting one number, one set of data in. So we press 1. Now I've got a frequency table there, frequency column. If you don't have a frequency column, that's okay. Sometimes it's better that way. So I'll just do it as it is, and then I'll show you how to turn the frequency on and off in a moment. So what you're then going to do is in this X column, you're going to input all your data. Now, it doesn't have to be in order. So all we're going to do is put that in. So we're going to put in 45 equals 25 equals 25 equals 29 equals 35 equals 27, 32, 34, 33, 24, 22, 29, 27, and 27. So one of the good things about this is you can check that you've got all your numbers in there, okay? And then you can press up and down to check your numbers as well, okay? So you can go through and do that. Now, if your frequency column's on, it automatically goes to 1, okay? So you've got one score of each of those numbers. Now, if you have the frequency on, the maximum number of scores you can put in is 20. Okay, so that's why it's important you know how to switch it on and off. So if you've got more than 20 scores that don't repeat, you'll need to have that frequency column off. All right, so that's how we put all our data in. Once we've got all our data in, if we want to find the mean, these are the steps. So what you're going to do is you're going to first press the AC button. Don't press the on button, AC button. So you press the AC button, everything disappears, but the numbers are still saved inside the calculator. Okay, so don't worry about that, it's still in there. Now, to get to the mean, you're going to press Shift and then Stat, which is where 1 is. You're going to get a statistics menu. So you've got type, data, sum, var, distro, and min-max. What we're going into is var. Okay, so var, so we're going into 4. And to find the mean, it is number 2. And you can see X bar is the notation that we use. So we're going to press 2 and then equals. And hopefully, yes, that's exactly the same. Okay, so you can see we did that calculation exactly the same. Now, one of the like you might look at it and go, oh, but miss, I've put in all of these numbers the same way. Like, I would have had to do the same amount of work here. But what we can now do is if I've got the information in that table, I can also do all these other calculations as well. So it's not just limited to this one mean calculation. So that's how we get into mean. So if you need to repeat that, just rewind, go back and have another look. What I'm now going to go into is how to find quartiles and your median. So, like before, what we're going to do is press AC. The numbers are still in the calculator. Then we're pressing Shift, 1 for stat, and then what we're going into this time is min-max, number 6. So you're going to click on 6, and you're going to need, and then you've got your functions here. So you've got min-x, max-x, Q1, med, and Q3. So med for median, okay, so if you want to find your median, you're going to press that. If we want the minimum and maximum value, so that's your smallest number and your largest number, and then you've got Q1, which is your lower quartile, and Q3, which is your upper quartile. So 4 is your median, so you're going to press on 4, press equals, and you can see it's exactly the same number as we had from before. So that's how we can work out our median. Now, if we want to now calculate range, let's go to range first. What we can do is we can actually use that function again. So press AC, go Shift, Stat, number 6 for min-max, and we can go 2 for max-x, so that's your highest value. Then you can go minus, Shift, Stat, 6, minimum x. Okay, so you can put all of that in, press equals. Oh, my number's wrong. Oh dear, I must have made a mistake. Yes, I did. That should have been a 45, not a 49. Oh my goodness. I will go fix that, but make sure you fix that one in your own notes. So the range should have been 23. Now for interquartile range, we can do the same thing. So press AC. Now if we go back into min-max, you can see we've got Q3 and Q1. So we can go 5, so Q3 minus, Shift, Stat, 6 for min-max, 3, Q3 minus Q1 equals, and there we go, we've got the 8 there. So that's how we can find median and our quartiles and interquartile range. All right, so let's have a look at working with a frequency table. So I'm going to clear the calculator. So the best way to clear the calculator is just to go mode and then go into comp. So that goes back into your normal mode. Okay, so that's your normal calculator mode. And then what we're going to do is go mode, stat, and one variable again. Now, if you've got a frequency table, it's all going to work out perfectly. If you don't have your frequency table, this is how you go to find it. So we're going to press Shift and then the mode button so we get into the setup. Now, we've got a whole bunch of things here. We don't really know what they are, but there's also a little arrow. So we're going to press the down arrow, and then we've got a button for stat. Now, it could be a different button on the black calculator. We're going to press 4, and you can see we can have frequency on or off. So if I want to turn it off, then I'm going to press 2, and then you can see the frequency is gone. So if I want to turn it back on, then Shift, Setup, down arrow, 4, and we're turning it back on. So what we're going to do with this information is we're going to put all of this into the table, and then we'll put the frequencies in. So when you press equals, so if I put in 10 equals, then the cursor automatically goes to the next one. So the best way to put this data in is to go down the column and then click into the frequency and go down the column there. So we've got 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So we've got 6 lines of our columns. Then what we can do is we can use our arrow pad to go into the frequency. Now if I press, because I'm right at the bottom, if I press down, it automatically pops back up to the top. So sometimes that's a little bit quicker than like clicking the whole way up. And then I can click across. And then what I'm doing is I'm typing these numbers in, and that will override these numbers. So if I press 2, that overrides it. 5, 9, 8, 3, and our last one's already 1. So that's how we can input that data into the calculator. Once it's in the calculator, now we can do all of these calculations exactly the same as what we did before. So to find the mean, we're going to press AC first. So you have to press AC. Then we go Shift, Stat, number 4 for var, and we're going into number 2. Now, the standard deviation is actually this button here, number 3. Okay, but we're going to do that in a later lesson. Okay, so at the moment, we're just looking at the mean equals 12.29. Perfect. Okay, so that's how we can find the mean without having to do all of these extra columns and adding extra numbers there. Okay, so there's our mean. AC, if I want to find the median, Shift Stat, Min Max, 4 for med, and you can see it is 2. Then I think range is easy enough that we're not going to put into the calculator, but we can also work out interquartile range here. So we could go Shift, Stat, Min Max. Now if you want, you can calculate them separately like what we did here. Okay, so you can find Q1 equals, Q3 equals, and then you do that calculation separately, or you could do it all in the one step. I'm just going to verify these numbers. So Q1, there we go, 11.5, and Q3, 5, 13. And so simply the interquartile range is when we subtract those two numbers from each other. So it is somewhat a quicker way, and it means that all your data is already in here, that you can do all of these calculations at the one time. Now, if there's any situations where maybe the data's wrong, so there's something wrong with the numbers that you've put in, what you can do to check it, you can go Shift, Stat. Now you can check your data by typing in 2. Okay, so if you type in 2, then you can get your table back up, okay, or your list of numbers. So that's how you can check your numbers. So if anything's gone wrong, you can come back in here and check through your numbers, make sure that they're all correct, you've got the right frequencies. But then when you go to do calculations, you do have to press AC first. Because if you don't, if you go Shift Stat, you can see you can't do any calculations. Okay, all you can do is input data. So if that happens, press AC again, and then you press AC, and then you can do your calculations that way. So that's a lot to take in, so take your time with it. When you're doing the questions here, make sure you're familiar with using the statistics mode, but also doing it by hand. So sometimes it's a lot quicker to work through the questions by hand. Sometimes the calculator is more useful. For the most part, these questions in the textbook, they lend themselves more towards just the hand methods. Okay, so you can just use, just put the numbers straight in rather than the statistics mode. But I'd like you to practice both of them because the statistics mode is very important when we're coming into, when we've got more data or when data's more mixed up. Thanks, girls.